Joining us now to discuss the economic outlook is Tim Doescher, Executive Director of Unleash Prosperity Now. Tim, good to have you with us today. Let's begin with your response to Secretary Bessent's forecast for a substantial acceleration in economic growth next year.
Well, I think he's absolutely right. There's no question about it. Let me tell you what isn't going to happen January 1st. That's a $4 trillion tax hike, which would have happened if we didn't pass one big, beautiful bill. And I'll tell you what, I hear the word recession being used. You know, they tried to pin him on that yesterday on the Sunday shows. Recession would definitely happen if we didn't pass one big, beautiful bill. And so not only are we going to get the pro-growth effects of it, like Kevin Hassett mentioned, you know, companies are already taking advantage of the full expensing of capital expenditures. They're taking advantage of that. That is extremely pro-growth. That means that more companies are going to be hiring in whatever specified industry that they are making that investment in. And so they are right. This will absolutely compound into a really great, strong first quarter of next year. And by the way, in terms of the government shutdown, you said 0.5% of GDP. You know, the Atlanta Fed is projecting above 4% growth. So if we settled for 3.5% growth, just taking their hypothetical in play, that's still markedly better than where we were under the Biden years.
All right, so a positive outlook. How is that going to impact low and moderate income households potentially differently as you see it?
Well, it's already happening. That is the really amazing number that we have done. You go to unleashprosperity.com, you can read our number crunching in terms of real median household income. Americans are seeing $1,200 additional under Trump already than they did under Biden. And that's simply because the regulatory burden that has been alleviated from the Biden administration, from what Trump has done, is already paying off in spades for people that are part of that median income gap. In addition, the inflation number really is the moneymaker here because, look, we had 9%, 9.2% inflation under Joe Biden. I mean, that is sky high. Prices today are 24% higher than they were in 2020. And as we've done the math on that, about 87% of that inflation is directly because of the Biden administration. So look, this is not something that is solved overnight, Stephanie. This is not something that we're just going to see go away. But with more money, with rising wages, higher earnings, this is actually going to be the thing that brings us to affordability out of the Biden malaise.
And looking now at some of the measures that were just mentioned that Secretary Bessent touched on, like no tax on tips, he mentioned Social Security and other measures. How effectively do you think they will support financial security for working Americans?
Well, I think it doesn't discourage people. I think that is a key driver in saying, look, this is more money coming your way. In addition to all the other things from extending the Trump tax cuts that people are going to see, they also continue to have that hope that, look, if you work overtime, you're not going to be taxed as highly on that overtime. If your Social Security is going to be taxed. Like I said, no tax on tips. That is more money in the bank. That is more of a bright spot on the horizon. And I will also say this. I agree that when you make more money, you tend to be more productive. And if there is an industry in which you are working overtime in, and now you see a reason to take those extra overtime shifts because you're going to start being able to not see taxes on that over time, that is a massive boost to productivity that I think that we haven't even been talking about and discussing when it comes to GDP. And so I think we're going to see that, Stephanie, play out over the next few months.
And what else, if anything, do you think might be needed to help support the economy and working families?
Well, I think you got to get the healthcare situation under wraps. You got to stop inflating healthcare prices by subsidizing insurance companies, giving them those, we talk about the big thing that we shut the government down for. We didn't, the Democrats shut it down for. But these Obamacare subsidies are going to skyrocket if we don't continue to fund them. Well, the problem is that we have been funding them, and healthcare is triple what it was when Obamacare was passed. So this is something that we really must take on because everybody, myself, I'm a type 1 diabetic. Healthcare is not cheap for me as a type 1 diabetic. Not at all. And it's not getting any cheaper. And so what you got to do is you got to replace that government Washington, D.C. mentality of bailing out insurance companies, hoping that they're going to give people better rates. And what you got to do is you got to open it up to state across state buying. You got to allow no caps on health savings accounts for people like me to store away money for those days where it's going to get tougher to pay for health care for me when I get older. That's the kind of stuff that we need to focus on in this country when you're talking about affordability. Not some temporary little $2,000 check. You got to go to the problem that where it actually is, and I believe healthcare is a big one.
And certainly many Americans are dealing with conditions like diabetes and other long-term conditions that will need that kind of long-term approach. Considering the record government shutdowns, estimated $11 billion in permanent economic damage, how can policymakers avoid future shutdowns? It's a big one.
Well, I think that's going to be up to the Democrats to do that. I mean, when you have a Republican fighting to keep the status quo in Washington, D.C., that's not a good thing. The status quo is what got us to this inflation in the first place. And so when you have the Democrats adding even more to that, that's going to be a problem. But what I will say is this. I believe that when push comes to shove, this is an election year that we're coming up on. I don't believe that the left is going to be pushing this shutdown narrative for political points because it did not work for them a couple months ago. It did not work for them a couple weeks ago, and it's not going to work for them a couple months from now. So the shutdown has to go. But I will say this. If you talk about getting rid of the filibuster, as Secretary Bessent did, I completely disagree with that. The filibuster has saved us from so many bad left-leaning ideas, making Washington, D.C. another state, making Puerto Rico a state. That's the kind of stuff that will happen if you do get rid of the filibuster. So I think that we can play the politics a little better than that and not risk opening ourselves up to rot when the Democrats take over.
At least through so many shutdowns over the course of the country's history, we've not had to take that measure so far. We'll all be watching closely, especially as 2026 comes just around the corner. Thank you so much for your time today, Tim Doescher. Good to speak with you.
Yes, ma'am. Have a great day.
And you.